My name is Colin Day. I live in Blaengwynfi. During the miners' strike, I was employed by St John's Colliery in my stake as a face electrician. Well, the first thing that can come to my mind is that when we put it to the vote to the men to go on strike, St John's voted against going on strike. But knackods in St John's voted to go on strike. But they were threatened that they would be penalised, they would stop their wages, but I do know that the men in St John's actually voted against the strike, and they were actually picketed out.
So why did the men in St John's vote against strike action?
They basically thought it was nothing to do with them. You know, it was, I think the colliery that was threatened to be shut was something like Cosgrove. It's a long time back now, isn't it? And we thought that in South Wales it was nothing to do with us until it actually came to actually closing mines in South Wales. But and like I said, we were picketed out because they sent people around different collieries that had voted to go to work, and they were just picketed out.
I mean, what did you expect when the industrial action started? What was the feeling amongst the workforce then?
Well, once we were picketed out, South Wales was very strong. Every colliery came out then. We weren't the only colliery that was picketed out. There was quite a few. And it became total in a short space of time.
So when you use the term picketed out, could you just explain to people what that means exactly?
The NUM sent people around and no one in the colliery would actually cross the picket line. They would set up pickets at the entrance of the collieries, and like I said, no one would cross the picket line to go to work then.
And did that cause like bitterness between the pickets and the miners who wanted to carry on working?
No, not really. We still had what people call scabs now that actually went to work, but I can't honestly say it caused. Once it was decided to go on strike in South Wales, it was total.
And you mentioned strike breakers or scabs. I mean, what was the feeling or the view towards people who just did keep on working?
My own personal feeling, you know, I didn't really care. I mean, they had families to look after, but you should always listen to what your lodge is saying to you, and if you are going to go out on strike, it should be total.
So once St John's went on strike, I mean, what was the view of the miners? Did you think it was going to be a long drawn out affair, or did you think it was going to be? No
one ever thought it would actually take a year. Everybody thought, oh, it'll be over in a couple of weeks, and so, but it got to the stage where you could see that I've always said that I honestly believe the strike was led by three megalomaniacs. Margaret Thatcher, was Ian McGregor, and Arthur Scargill.
So, I mean, you mentioned, well, okay, we'll start with Maggie Thatcher then. I mean, what was your view and the view of the miners of Margaret Thatcher at the time?
Well, Margaret Thatcher wanted to get revenge basically on the miners. She wanted to... The miners defeated a couple of Conservative governments, and she wasn't very happy about that, and I think all she wanted was revenge.
Do you think it was personal for her?
Yes. Simple as that.
And did it feel personal for you miners on strike?
No, I don't think so. Once we decided to go on strike, that was it. We thought it would be over in a couple of weeks, a month, maybe 3 months. Nobody thought it would last 12 months.
So at what point did you realise that things were going to be that this wasn't going to be like other strikes, so then things might be more protracted?
That hit home early on, and then we decided then, as a lodge in St John's, that we go around and try and set up places where miners could go to be fed, because they weren't allowed to have strike pay. They had no money coming into the house whatsoever, and we thought, if this is going to last a long time, we've got to get out acting place, like, and we set up different places throughout different villages in the area, from Nanty all the way up to Blaenwynfi, Glencorrog, and it was a very bitter strike, you know.
Did you mentioned the different communities there? Despite the bitterness, communities pull together, I believe?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Our best friends at our time were our wives. They were absolutely brilliant in the village that I lived in, and most of the people set up different, I can't say kitchens, but where miners could go to have a meal. We set up food parcels for everyone. The amount of money and help we had from places like Germany, Belgium, Ireland, Scotland, you know, was amazing.
And just to sort of clarify, to point out to people, because some people, I just know from my own personal experience being on strike, some people don't realise that when you're actually on strike, you don't receive a penny.
No.
So, I mean,
No.
just describe to people what it was like not receiving any pay for 12 months.
For 12 months. A lot of people found it, well, more than a lot of people found it, not everybody found it hard. But when you think of my own village, old age pensioners were giving us £5 to buy food for, you know, the people in what we had was Clid Van. And people would put in the kitty, all the old age people would put in the kitty, and we managed to get the local co-op is only open because of the miners' strike. Because what I was able to do was get the committee to buy all the food from our local co-op. And when you're talking about, you know, 1,200 food parcels, that's a lot of food. And the co-op is still going to this day because of that.
Just explain to people then, what was an average day for a miner on strike?
Well, we had different gangs set up. It was all run from Nanty Library. There was gangs set up to go to different places, the steelworks, the wharf in Neath. I can't remember the name of it now. Different collieries setting up picket lines themselves so that nobody else went to work. Only knackards, you know, who, as I said at the beginning, actually voted to go on strike. But they were, what's the word? They were threatened.
So could just explain to people, who were the knackards as you described them?
Knackards were the officials working in the colliery, the overmen, the firemen, and other people. You know.
Yeah, so you were just explaining what was the average day for a miner on strike? Sorry to go back to the original question.
The average day. We set up different picket lines throughout the area. 8-hour shifts to stop people, like in park slip and things like that, you know. Stop trains coming out and lorries going in, bringing coal in and out. And I'm going to think now.
I mean, when you say you'd stop them going in and out, I mean, would you physically stop them, or would you try and persuade them just by...
Just, all by persuasion. There was no physicality. Nobody actually threatened people. There were a couple of instances where tragedies happened, like that young boy that threw a stone off the bridge, with the taxi and killed the driver. But I mean, that was few and far between. Like,
I mean, when something like that happened, I think it was on the M4 near Port Talbot. Was I right in saying that?
No, it was up in one of the valleys. It was.
Okay.
And there was a taxi taking people to work, and the bloke was standing on the bridge, and he threw a stone off, and it actually killed someone in the taxi.
I mean, what was the feeling of the strikers when something like that happened? Because I think I'm right in saying that the taxi was taking
what they call scrubs
to work.
To work, and he just it was just a freak accident, basically. I'm not saying he didn't try to, he just threw a stone, but to actually hit somebody is very difficult, as you know.
And what was the view on the picket lines when you heard about that incident in particular?
Well, sadness, for the young man that died, didn't it? He was just doing his job, basically, but 1 minute he's going to work, and the next minute he's killed, like. But it wasn't deliberate. It just happened.
I mean, what was the view of miners from the MUM about the support you had of other unions or lack of support?
Oh, it was never a lack of support. The support we had of other people were absolutely brilliant. And as I said, they sent food parcels, food, clothes from all over Europe to Nanty Library, and it was shared out equally amongst the 9 different areas, and it was absolutely superb. The women, if it wasn't for the women, the strike wouldn't have lasted 3 months, let alone 12 months.
So what exactly were the women doing that was so supportive to the strikers?
They were on the picket line as well. But most of the time they'd set up soup kitchens where the miners could go to have a tidy meal. I mean, there was a strong rumour in Blaengonby that they had 57 recipes for corned beef. I don't know if it was true, but...
And I mean, what was it like at home for families during the strike? Obviously, very little money, if any money, is coming in. Still got children and mouths to feed. I mean, what was it like at home for people with families? I mean, I know yourself, you had children. Yeah,
but I was lucky because my children had grown up, and they were actually working, so it wasn't too bad. They had their own money, but because there were basically only 2 of us in the house, it was we could manage. So yes, it's a long time to go back. That's why you should ask me next week. Then what do we do?
Well, we can do it again next week if you want, if anything comes to. So, what on the bigger picture? Then, I mean, what do you think of the sort of going into the strike? Then, did you think there was a strike that the miners would win?
The sad thing about strikes, there's no winners or losers. You never have what you want, but we had to show the government that our communities would be so greatly affected by the strike and by the closure of collieries. You taking people's livelihoods away, and most people were miners in villages. I think when South Wales shut, 23,000 miners lost their job. And that's not including the ancillary people that were delivering things to the miners, to the collieries, not including them. And but it was a vast effect on the communities. I don't think the communities will ever be the same again.
I mean, but going into the strike, then what realistic result were you hoping to get? What was the opinion of the majority of miners? What was the opinion of yourself?
Well, if you want to shut places down, by all means shut them down, but not to the extent that they wanted to shut them down. I mean, how many mines in Wales shut? I think it was a good 20 odd shut in no time, And those people were out of work, and it was that bad. Like it wasn't very good at all.
mean, you mentioned him earlier, Arthur Scargill, the leader of the miners. I mean, what's your opinion on him and how he dealt with the strike?
Well, it was never the intention of the miners to actually overthrow the government. All they wanted to do was to see a little bit of common sense. If you're going to shut a colliery down, bring other work into the place so that at least they've got a job to go to. I mean, you only got to look at the children today. I mean, they travel from Langwynfi all over the country now. You know, we've been actual, what they call them, when you get on a train and things like that.
Commuter.
We've been commuter since 1969. You know, that's a long time for people not to have work in their own place. And one of the beauties of the what's it called? Sorry again, Gary.
That's it.
No, the park that they're going to put up. No, the park there on top of the site.
Oh yeah, the Adventure Park.
Yeah. You know, if that comes about, that'll actually save the valley. And I did have a couple of people talking to me yesterday about they hope the Rhondda Tunnel opens soon as well, and that'll help in no way, you know. But what people don't realise, people like to go to work, and they like to work in their own place. It's not always nice to travel hundreds, you know, 40, 50 miles, sometimes the other side of the country, looking for work. Like in it, it's not on.
But how do you think Arthur Scargill led the miners? What's your opinion on him?
Well, with Scargill, everything that he said was true, and everything that he said was going to happen was true. But it's not the job of the miners to actually turn around and overthrow the government. That's for the people of the country to do that. You know, and all we wanted to do was to make sure our communities weren't decimated, and we could still have a good life to live like.
So with that in mind then, do you think Scargill was too hardline with the government, or do you agree with his tactics, or do you agree with the way he led the dispute or the strike?
At the time, yes. But in hindsight, you think to yourself then, yeah, but like we didn't go on strike. We went on strike to save our communities because we knew what would happen. Whereas other people in higher authority didn't realise what would happen. You know, some of them sit in the little places where they haven't got a clue about the real world, but we knew what would happen would be a tragedy, and it basically was.
Do you think Scargill was a bit detached from the reality of the miners, or do you think he was in touch with what was happening on the picket lines and on the coalface, literally?
I don't know. I can't honestly say. I mean, he was on the picket lines quite a few times, but recent history have shown that over his little flat in London, that he wasn't a friend of the miners when he came to it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little pact between him and Maggie to cause it anyway.
I mean, a lot of people have described the miners' strike as a class war. Is that what it felt like for you?
Oh, it was definitely a class war. I mean, people living in London and the big cities didn't have a clue about little villages and things like that, you know. They didn't know that you were actually fighting for your community, not to keep the bit. I mean, the worst place you can actually work in the world is underground. But it was a job that you went to and enjoyed. And when I go around and speak to miners now and ask them what do they think, 97% of them will tell, I wish it was still open. But, you know, they'd have far better jobs than working underground.
What was the thought of the miners when you were like demonised in the press. You know, particularly some of the right-wing press were particularly scathing about yourselves.
As you know, of the top 10 newspapers, I would say 8 of them are Tories anyway. You've got one Labour paper, and the rest, well, they're supposed to be independent. So they're going to go for people like Maggie. When I went on a cruise a couple of years ago, and I remember sitting with this captain of a ship, and he was a great admirer of Margaret Thatcher, and I had to tell him he didn't do the Valleys proud at all.
And what was the captain's response to that?
He didn't say anything. Yeah. Once I told him, he was dumbfounded.
And what was the view of the miners? I know it's a very general question, but like towards the police and people who had to confront the miners at times?
Believe it or believe it not, the police in South Wales were brilliant, I got to be honest. There was very few people that were, what's the word?
Antagonistic.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that, I would say something else. But the local police were, you know, we never had a problem with them at all. It's when they sent other people in, and I honestly believe there were soldiers in the middle dressed up, because most of the police uniforms, they didn't have numbers on them. They just had empty shoulders, you know, no numbers on them, saying TC-49 or whatever. So they weren't real police. I honestly believe they were soldiers dressed as police.
And then, did you know some of the local policemen who had to police the strike, if you like? Did you know them personally?
I didn't know them personally. We didn't have a policeman up with us at the time, did we? If I'm not mistaken. Might have, 84. But yeah, the local police were, you know, they was very sympathetic to the people, fair play. But when they started picket lines going up with the police, they weren't normal police. They were soldiers from somewhere else.
At what point, or was there a point when you realised that you weren't going to win the strike?
Like I said at the beginning, you don't win strikes anyway. Someone's got to suffer. But we knew that the suffering would be prolonged if we didn't put a fight up anyway. And if it wasn't through the women actually supporting us, the strike wouldn't have lasted 3 months, as I said.
So at what point, though, did the sort of talk on the picket line, did that change from winning the strike or getting a good result for yourselves to, no, we're going to have to go back to work? I mean, what point did you sort of start considering or start talking about it?
There was a remark passed to me on, what's the longest day of the year? June the 23rd, is it?
Yeah,
something
like that, yeah.
And
21st, no?
21st or something. It's one of those 2 days. And somebody turned around and said, we won't win now because we are going to the shorter step. We won't win now. You know, that was halfway through this. Well, not halfway through the strike. It was about 4 months into the strike, and they told me like, we won't win now. Mm. So,
I mean, I think as well, I'm right in saying there was lots of coal being brought in from Australia.
Oh yeah, but you know, we didn't actually see the coal coming in. I mean, a few of the boys went down to the Abbey and climbed up the cranes and stop them getting coal into the steelworks. But that was a laugh. That was. They went up in the daytime, and when they realised how far up they were afraid to come down in the morning. So we had to go up and fetch them down from the crane.
Even though you were going through great hardship, financially and physically and mentally, no doubt, I mean, I'm guessing there must have been a great sense of camaraderie.
Oh, always was. And like I said, the old age people in the village were absolutely brilliant. You know, they didn't have big pensions anyway, and they were still giving £5 notes into the kitty, like. That was the best part of it, was the way they got together as well, you know. I'm not saying everybody, but quite a few people got together. And
what do you think about the support you receive from the Labour Party? I don't necessarily mean grassroots members. I mean the leadership of the Labour Party at the time. I think Neil Kinnock was the leader.
Yeah, we actually went up to Parliament to see Neil Kinnock, and everyone was supportive, you know. I can't find fault with them, most people, because they actually knew that we were fighting for our communities, not for our own causes, like.
And what was the feeling? Just explain the process then of how you went back to work. I presume you were balloted, but whether you... Yeah, what was the process?
We were balloted. We decided to go back to work, but it was a dignified entrance, you know. It wasn't... no one was very happy, but you had to go back to work. You'd have been out 12 months. And everyone has seen that photograph of Mardy Colliery going in with a brass band. We didn't have a brass band in St. John's, but we all went in together. We decided we'd all walk in together on the day shift. And that was it.
And how was the response? I presume those guys there, well, scabs you'd call them, who worked through the strike were still there. I mean, how were they? I mean, was it difficult to interact with those people?
Personally, I can interact with anybody, but there was quite a bit of a bad feeling between people, you know, and some of them are not even talking to this day because of what had happened, like, you know. But sometimes you got to let bygones be bygones, like. I think we started back to work in 85, and the colliery shut in 86. You know, so everything that he said was going to happen actually happened. And then, like I said, 23,000 miners were made unemployed in South Wales, like, in no time. And we didn't have to go to the door to sign on. You know, none of the miners had to go to the door to sign on. It was... they give you £1,000 for every year that you'd been in the colliery. Our jobs are basically bought off us, you know. So.
But how do you think the lasting impact of the mines closing has affected, well, Blaengunvi and Abergunvi, on all the Glencorrog, Cymru, all the surrounding valleys, Maesteg?
I think you only got to look at the populations, you know. I mean, when I was living in Blaengunvi, there was somewhere like 4,500 people living there. Now there's not 4,500 in the valley. So you can see the difference already, you know, population-wise.
And when you look back on the miners' strike now, 40 years later, do you think things could have been done any differently from a miner's point of view to try and get a more positive result?
Yeah, I would imagine they could actually do it in a phased system. You know, they could close a pit here and there and transfer the men, you know, just to keep them in work and keep them employed. I don't. You know, it's a difficult question. I'm not. I don't know. Yeah.
So when people, I mean, you mentioned the captain of the ship there on your cruise. I mean, when people talk about the miners' strike, about 40 years later, I mean, what's the first memory that comes into your head? What's the first thought?
Going to work and being stopped. So you can't go to work. We picketed in. That's the first thing I can see. You walked up to the colliery and there were pickets from, I won't mention the name of the place, there were pickers from that colliery stopping you going to work. And you never, miners would never cross the line. I remember when I went, I worked for electrical firm in the Abbey, and the nurses were on strike. And when I went, they said, we're on strike, and I just turned around and went back home. Didn't cross the picket line. Whether that would happen today, I haven't got a clue.
No. Did the fact that I think I'm right in saying the miners weren't balloted about strike action, was that a mistake tactically at the start, do you think?
No, I never thought it was a problem, to be honest. The year before, we made an agreement that if collieries were being shut, we would come out on strike. It was all to do with the press, and the press was the ones that were actually voting. And the year before, we'd already voted, the Christmas time, I think it was, everybody had voted to say that if they decided to close certain collieries, we would go out on strike. But the press weren't worried about that. All they wanted another vote on top of that vote, and we'd already voted in the first vote.
So the miners felt that a mandate had already been
passed, yeah.
But then when it came to the actual strike, your particular colliery didn't vote for that particular strike?
Well, we had to go and have a vote. You've got to ask the men first, didn't it? And the men voted, say no, we'll go out on strike if certain things happen. And so St. John's voted again not to go on strike. But we were picketed out by another colliery.
Have you any particularly funny stories or memorable stories you can just tell people about the miners' strike? I know it was real hardship, but sometimes you get a lot of humour, dark humour people use to get through tough times.
No, I better not say the one that I know of. I know that we were allowed to send 30 men to the colliery as just to keep the colliery running, ticking over, So one week an electrician would go, a banksman or whatever, and there was a kerfuffle with the office, and me and Ron Roberts, who was the vice chairman, we had to go up to the colliery and find out what the matter was. And the manager of the colliery was sitting down in the plant maintenance room, and there was a big hole behind him, about that big. And what's the matter, Mr. Bond? An electrician tried to kill me, he said. So, what do you mean? Well, I told him to go down the north pit, down the south pit, and he said, no, I'm only here to go down the north pit. And he argued with me, and then he threw a metronome at me. And it went straight through, good job, he said, it went straight through the plasterboard. And it was there in front of you. I won't mention no names, but but that's what happened. But there are quite a few things you can laugh at, but like I said, it was hard times for everybody. That's the sad thing. And whether it could have been avoided, I doubt it very much.
Am I right in saying as well that people in the local areas, in the valleys and stuff, they were going up, getting coal from the old mines, the old levels, to try and keep themselves going?
Yes, in our local village, we actually hit the Rhondda number 2 seam behind Margaret Terrace, and because we weren't the only people that were actually receiving coal at the time throughout the strike were the old age people. The miners themselves didn't have anything, so we opened this seam up, and we were filling sacks of coal, taking them to your house. But a few people in the village then got greedy and started selling it around the village, which meant that the forestry came then and pulled everything in. But yeah, I remember that.